Welcome back to another race breakdown, everyone. I am Kevin Sully, not joined by Carl Lewis on this edition, and we're not talking sprints. We're going to do distance this time because Grant Fisher's 12:53 American indoor record in a race that also featured the Canadian record, the British record, the European record, too good to pass up. So we're going to break down this race. Let's get it started, and we're going to dissect every single lap as we go because this was one for the history books, and it's important to think going in what the target was. Now, did we know what the target was is even a better question to start with because there wasn't much talk about an American record going into this race. The only indication that you got about how fast this thing could be was when you saw the results from the earlier heat. As they go through this first lap, Josh Thompson takes the lead. And what I mean by that is you look at the results from Heat 2, the winner was Woody Kincaid, 13:05. So this was the heat that was before the fast heat, and they were running 13:05. So that gave a good indication that this meet's going to be fast. The Bowerman guys are in shape, ready to roll, and they expect Heat 1 to go even quicker than that. So that was the clue, but it came a bit late. You had to be paying real close attention because oftentimes Bowerman Track Club or other pro runners show up to these meets and sometimes they're just running for qualifying time. You can't necessarily assume that it's going to be a record attempt every time they go out. So here we go through the first quarter. And if you're thinking about 13 flat pace, looking at sub 63, around 31 and change mid for each 200 meter segment. So Thompson's right on here doing the pace work early on. And behind him, Zuhair Talbi, and then Sam Atkin, Fisher, Mark Scott, Mohamed, and then Connor Mance in a nice straight line, taking full advantage of this quick BU track. And you see Emmanuel Bohr back there who would eventually run 13 flat in what was a very underrated performance because of all the sub-13s in front of him, but he went under the old record of 13:01 set by Galen Rupp. But speaking of that, let me just hop over real quick and look at a little bit of a comp between Rupp 2014 and Fisher. Thompson got him out a little bit quicker, and by 800, 205 versus 206, and then by a K, almost a 2-second difference. But the real difference is going to be made up at the end, so we'll get back to that later on in the race because Rupp did close faster in his last mile than the previous 2 miles, but Fisher just did it by a much larger amount, going under 4 minutes, well under 4 minutes for that final mile and under 5 minutes for the final 2 kilometers, which is just incredible to think about. But there you see that split, 2:36 for Thompson. You know, Bowerman Track Club, they're really good at these time trial type races, especially, as you saw Mohamed run that sub 12:50 outdoors. Woody Kincaid ran a sub 13 outdoors. They've really perfected this. And what we have here is a quality field on top of the Bowerman time trial magic kind of coming together on a fast track to produce something memorable. Look at that. Let's pause this for a second. Look how straight this line here is. This is just a model of efficiency for how to run a quick time. And everybody's getting pulled out to this quick pace, this 13 flat pace. And some of them are going to hold on, some are going to fall back, but a lot of PRs by massive amounts all throughout this field. Fisher there still tucked in 4th behind Atkin and then just ahead of Scott and Mohamed. Mark Scott from Great Britain had some really good time trials himself last year during the outdoor season. So no stranger to this type of setup, and these guys were ready to roll. See about 3:40 or so there, with Thompson and Talbi leading the way. Let's check in on that pace chart. Yeah, 3:40 versus 3:42, but 3:42.0, so it's about a 1.5 difference. So not a major difference here. Now, again, Rupp closed faster, so at this point, closed faster than his first couple miles. So at this point, they are not running a pace that's indicative of 12:53. Other than the fact you have to consider what Woody Kincaid did. And the previous day, you got to consider how fast Gabrielle Debut-Stafford and Elise Cranny closed in that women's 5,000. So the idea was, in retrospect, go through 13 flat pace and then close hard off of that, and that's exactly what they did. So Thompson cruising along there, still doing an excellent job pacing Talby and then Atkins. So they go through 4:43 on that lap. Still about that second and a half or so. Let's switch over to the actual splits themselves just to see. This is Fisher. So 30, 31, 31 high, 31.4, 31.6, 31.8, 32, 32. So when you see those 32s, that is where it's starting to spell trouble in terms of an American record. Because, like I said, you want 31 mids or so to get that mark. So Talby now in front with Josh Thompson off. Yeah, so 32s is where you start seeing the projections creep up higher and higher. Now, ultimately, they balance that out, but you need those 31 mids or the 31 lows to get you there. And if you're talking about 12:53, if you just even that out throughout the course of the race, obviously even quicker. That's just for 13 flat. So Talby continue to lead here. All right, 5:45 through that lap. Fisher in third, Scott in fourth, Mohamed in fifth. And they are nicely strung out once again. See Jerry Schumacher directing traffic there on the infield. And let's go back to that pace share. So we're right in the middle here of these 31 mid to high. They never would get up to, or Fisher would never get up to 32 again. So these were the slower of the splits. Some 31 highs later on, but he never touched 32 after that early point of the race. And that's just a result of, he's just following the pacemaker. So it's sort of smart to tuck in there and see what he can get out of those early laps. And you can make up a half second here, half second there. It's just a cumulative toll of 32s when you're going for 31.6s or 31.7s. It starts to add up when you're talking about chasing a record this difficult. Ahmed there in fifth and Scott ahead of him. Now I wondered, is that order that the Bowerman men are lined up and indicative of anything? Like, did they have a feeling that Fisher was going to be the one who was going to pop the big one and to let him go behind Atkin, or did it just happen that way? Tend to believe it just sort of happened that way, or maybe it was scripted that far down. You see Shadrach Kipchirchir there in the USA jersey, and then Emmanuel Bohr, which is right over here. Watch out for him. He's been running really well the last couple of years. Took a shot at the American record last year, beat Paul Chalimo, and then now a 13 flat. We know that when it comes time for championship racing, ultimately it's going to come down to closing speed, not just straight up time trialing. But keep an eye on Emmanuel Bohr. So we're coming up here on 3K. Talby, it looks like he's going to step up. I thought this was kind of a funny part of the race because he drifts back and then tries to hop back in. And part of what he's thinking, I bet, is, hey, I've gone this far. I know it's going to be tough because I've been leading, but maybe I could just hang on for the ride and get a crazy PR because I know how fast these guys are going to run. But then you have Atkin take over the pace. And this is where it just benefits from having such a deep field, because in a lot of other races, getting a pacer through to 3K would be perfect, would be enough. I mean, you had two pacers there, Thompson and then Talby. But then you have Atkin essentially serving as a pacemaker for this Bowerman Track Club trio to keep the pace going, to keep pulling them through. Let's go back, though, to our comp sheet. So that split that we just saw, 55 to 53. So he was really close to Rupp's 13:01 at this point. I mean, again, we're just right around between a second and a half and 2 seconds throughout all these laps. But Fisher's close was just something to behold. So Atkin there in front, Bowerman Track Club 1, 2, 3. You see the famous Fisher form here. Robotic is the term used often. It looks like Atkin's turning around, looking at, hey, are you ready to go? Are you going to help out doing some leading? How's this going to work? And he's pointing and trying to communicate with those Bowerman Track Club guys about what the plan exactly is, because it's a collaborative effort at this point. Whoa, and then Ahmed, let's look at this. This could have been bad for Mohamed. Let's take it back a couple frames. Let's go back. You see the arms flailing there. Almost steps off the track entirely. And this is, Atkins trying to move back in after being a leader and then drifting off. Let's look at that. Yeah, see? Ahmed's arm goes up. Didn't lose a ton of time, but thankfully disaster was averted. So here, Fisher to the front now. And he's going to have to basically hold this for 3 more minutes. And this is when you knew it was Fisher on a mission, because this lap and the next lap, he's going to start to just open up the slightest gap and put pressure on everybody who followed. See, so you see Bohr there moving up into 3rd place, putting himself in the mix, and Mark Scott doing his best to just latch on there into 4th. Atkin, who did all that great leading, he's going to end up running a really spectacular time. I mean, he's dropped back here behind Shadrach Kipchirchir, but still pretty good. So 10:25, just go back over here. This is where we start to see the separation. So this is at 4,000. We have a real break between him and Rupp, because now the difference is 3 seconds. So if you're saying, okay, now they're going to finish the exact same, well, that would put Fisher at 12:58 because Rupp ran 13:01, but we know he went well beyond that. And that split to 10:25. Let's see just what that was, because it looked like an injection of pace. Yeah, 29:37. So not huge, but enough to break open this race. So back-to-back sub-30s, the first 2 sub-30s of the race. But then from there, well, let's just go back to it. We can check it out. It's pretty even. And when you watched it the first time, at least when I watched it the first time, I thought he was really accelerating, but it was more he just got to a pace around 29 high, 30 low, and then eventually gets to 28 on that last one, and he just stuck with it and was not budging from that pace at all. And it looked like he was accelerating because everybody else was having a lot of trouble hanging on. Now, the 28 last 200 was quick, but it was everything that came before it that made it so special. So now we got a gap to Bohr. We got Josh Thompson. We got everybody. We got look at all the Bowerman people over here cheering, saying, go, 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 because we're inside 3 minutes to go here, or 2 minutes to go in terms of total running time. And Bohr at this point looks like he's going to give Fisher a run for his money. He has a tough last couple laps and drifts outside of 13 minutes and behind the 2 other BTC guys. But so 11:26 for Fisher. Or 11:24 high. So that was another 29. So a series of 4 laps between 29.3 and then 29.8. Again, it wasn't a huge move that broke away. It was a very subtle move, very vintage Grant Fisher. But it just looks like he's putting everybody in the rear view at this point. So here we go with 400 to go. And let's look at that comp. Let's look at that Rupp comp again. 11:55 to 12. So now it's grown to 5 seconds. So Rupp would have been back with that group. It's kind of fair to say he would have been. Now Bohr's, because you could say Bohr ran 13 flat and Rupp ran 13:01. They would have been the same. But Bohr went with Fisher and then slowed down towards the end, whereas Rupp still stayed solid. So he would have been somewhere in that, Ahmed, Scott behind them, but staying steady, whereas Fisher now is running 29s that people are struggling to match. And at this point, you're thinking, because the projection just kept dropping from 13.08 to 13.05 to 13 low. Now you know it's going to be sub 13. You know the American record is gone. It's just a matter of by how much. And then we get the perfect Fisher form here, all the 90-degree angles in full flight. 12:24 at the bell. Crowd is going absolutely nuts and nobody else in sight. Now, what you can't see is Ahmed and Scott moving in to second and third, going past Bohr falling back, and Ahmed and Scott having a spectacular race in their own right as Fisher kicks hard for home here. This is the moment he's waited for. All those high expectations, being a sub-4 high school miler, realized here. 12:53, close race there for second with Ahmed and Mark Scott. But Fisher gets it done. Fisher has his moment. Fisher smashes the American record, gets the hug from Lopez Lemong, and then the massive BTC group hug right there. So let's look at it one more time just to see those last couple laps. And you see the comp to Rupp here. But those last couple laps, 29.78 and then 28.96. Again, it wasn't a massive move. It was just a gradual ratcheting down and then sticking at that pace. And then, yeah, he did drop it a little bit here, 28.96. But these guys, like you look at, these are Ahmed splits. You know, he went sub 32, but sub 30 as well. But 29.2, 29.2, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30. It wasn't like he fell apart. It's just Fisher got that advantage and then stuck with him. And then here's Scott, who closed a little bit quicker than Ahmed, but not quite enough. So Ahmed breaks his Canadian record, Scott, the European and British record, and then Emmanuel Bohr went under the old American record, but obviously not quick enough. And then you see his last 3 laps. This is why it's not really the same as Rupp's race, because Rupp was still holding steady towards the end. Bohr got back into the 32s. So this is the updated all-time list: Bekele, Gebrselassie, Coleman, Koech, Grant Fisher, Eliud Kipchoge. It's a good list to be in. Good list to be in. Then you have Ahmed 7th, Scott 8th, and then you go down here to Emmanuel Bohr, 13 flat for 11th, and then Sam Atkin, who did that leading there, holds on for 13:03, which is good for 16th best all time. So easy to call this the deepest men's indoor 5,000 in history. Fisher almost breaks Bernard Lagat's outdoor record as well, was really close to that as well. So 12:53.73. Things are shaping up to be extremely interesting in the men's 5,000 this year, and we have another scintillating Bowerman time trial to help stir the pot to get things going. That's it for this edition of the Race Breakdown. Make sure to check out all the stuff on our YouTube page, our ranking shows, This Week in Track, as well as the other race breakdowns we've done at the Sprint Focus, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show earlier with Carl Lewis. You can check all those out on our YouTube page or on the site FloTrack.com. We'll talk to you guys next time.